Open seating. Are we good? You didn't tell me that we were live. All good? Okay. Been a long week. Meetings 8 to 5 every day. Lots of stuff going on. But here we are at church with our crowd of 3 whole people. I don't even know if Alicia is here by choice. So, color series. We started with red, which we talked about, which was I alluded to it being around sacrifice. I had talked to Lorinda a little bit, and she said it was more around redemption. But wasn't her study, so I get to do what I want. Yellow we talked about quite a bit with gold and kind of representing God and his stake in the claim. So today we're going to go through green. Green is another fairly positive one, so you'll be happy. Red was a little bit dismal. Yellow was pretty good. So green, I'll spill the beans early just so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm getting at with the verses that I went through, but pretty self-explanatory. Green, kind of indicative of life and fertility in the Bible, being able to bear fruit, that kind of stuff. So when you hear it, think about being in season, being able to serve, being able to do the things that God wants you to do rather than being choked out or burnt up or dried out. There's a lot of references to, if something bad comes along, then it's going to dry out the plants or it's going to choke it out with thorns. There's the famous passage in Psalms talking about lying down in green pastures, and there's tons of references to being fruitful throughout this. So kind of giving away my punchline at the beginning, so we'll try and tie it back together, do a little bit differently than I did the other times. I only have about 4 pages of verses, which is a little bit shorter than typical. So I'll probably only be up here for about 45 minutes, I would think. Maybe a little bit longer if I ramble. But yellow and red had some diversity across examples in the Bible just because there was a lot more to work with. Green only had about 40 instances, I think 44 across the entire thing, and a lot of them referred to the same exact thing. So he was either talking about green grass, green herbs, green corn stalks, or green trees in different varieties, whether they be fir, olive. I think there was a mention of something else as well, but they pretty much all went to the same deal. So it was hard to kind of pick apart and get a huge, well thought out branching message about all the different things that it talks about, because every mention is pretty similar. I'll try and tie it back to quite a bit of focus less on green and more on kind of what they're describing. So we'll talk a little bit about the herbs and the trees and the grass and stuff like that and get into it. So I won't draw out my intro any longer. We'll pray and we'll get started. Dear Lord, thanks for getting us here tonight. Thanks for getting me in my Bible this week and hopefully open up my head and my heart to get the message out that you want me to get out. Thanks for sticking by us through all this crazy stuff going on, and thanks for giving us a church and a good church family. Thanks for giving us your book. Keep us in your word. Let us not be hearers of your word, but doers also. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so first, I think the first mention of green in the Bible is Genesis 1:30, talking about going through the garden and populating it with all the cool stuff that Adam and Eve got to see for that short time that they were hanging out there. It says, "And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. So already a correlation between life and green there. Um, Pretty easy to draw that based on all the other stuff that we'll go through. But if we look back at Genesis 1, 11 and 12, it says, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So fairly repetitive, but talks about yielding seed, yielding fruit, being good. There wasn't a whole lot of it makes it super easy to put thing in one category or another when God says, here's this thing, it's good. Because if he says it's good, then that's something that you need to pay attention to. There were a lot of concrete examples of red being bad and of yellow being good or bad, talking about people abusing it or using it for sacrifice to the Lord or using it to, gain more worldly goods. This makes it easy on us. We can see that bearing fruit, obviously, if you look at Galatians chapter 5, I reference it a lot. I think it's verse 23, talks about the fruit of the Spirit. So bearing fruit for the Lord is always a good thing. Everything that you can get out of those fruit that he lists. I mean, if you were to able to be known as one of those things, I think it would be an accomplishment just because of all the extremely important characteristics that are listed out there. But I guess you could bear fruit in the other way if you really wanted to. There are fruits of men, and I've mentioned these a lot as well, and they're all bad. So if that's any indication of the kind of binary between the two, everything that a guy or man does on their own is a bad thing, and everything that God provides is a good thing. So think about when you're associating green to bearing fruit, think about it on the good side, because it's about being fertile. It's about being fruit bearing. It's about being ready and willing to do the things that God needs you to do. You're in season and capable of doing those things. If you're dried up, if you're burnt out, if you're withering, any of those times that comes up around, it's usually in a negative connotation, talking about something interrupting what God needs you to do. And they talk about being bitter a lot as well, having bitter herbs. If the body's mechanism against ingesting bad things is making it taste bitter. So if you ever taste anything that's bitter, most medicines that you take have a really bitter taste. That's why in the pills, normally they put a little bit of sugar to offset that. It's your body's way of saying that whatever you're eating right now is not good. So if you see bitter in the Bible, just think about biting into something that's really nasty and that flavor that it leaves on your tongue where you're just like, oh, I can't. I'm not a big coffee person, so I think coffee tastes really bitter. I know I'm getting all the looks, but like when you drink black coffee, it's just like this taste that sits in your mouth that's super bitter, and it just makes me want to gag. Like I can't stand it. If I ever drink coffee, it's like the mocha frappa chocolate super chino cream foam thing from Starbucks, where it's like this much coffee and the rest is just sugar. You got to cover it up with a lot of stuff in order to get that. And I think that's a good representation of it is, a little bit of bitter goes a long way. You can be in season, you can be fruitful. And then as soon as that bitter starts to creep in, it's kind of hard to hide that flavor. So it's definitely something that's, I don't want to say time bound, but relative to your ability during a certain time. I think this is one of my best times to be fruitful for other people. Being able to get up here in front of the camera and talk to all of our tens of followers, and being able to get in the Bible every day and put together these messages and just do that for people, and being able to talk about this on a deeper level than you should get saved. well, why should I? And I say, well, I don't know. Being able to go into that deeper and talk to my dad about that stuff, and being able to talk to my sister and my mom and my grandma eventually, I know that she's going to be hard pressed to be convinced on all this kind of stuff, but I have the capability now. I'm growing through getting in the Bible, and every time that I dive into it, I learn a little bit more, and it adds more to kind of my utility belt and being able to answer those questions. So the more knowledge I gain, the more green I am, the more fruitful and spiritually fertile I am, in order to kind of distribute those seeds to the places where they're going to hopefully take root. We'll look at it a little bit later, but there's lots of different places where you can drop seeds, and you're dropping seeds all the time as a Christian, and they can land on good fertile ground, and they can take root, and they can grow up so somebody else can bear fruit, or they can land on rocky or thorny or unfertile ground where I might talk to my dad about Christ, and he'll say, you almost convinced me. Is it King Agrippa that says that? Yeah. You almost convinced me that to get saved. I was talking to him the other day. It was like, 11 o'clock at night, something like that. When he decides to start talking, he just keeps on going. He loves to talk. So we were talking about it, and he was making some good points. They were worded a little bit roughly, but he had the right idea. And so we were talking back and forth about it, and I was like, we both always kind of had it in our minds that it was kind of this scale of, you have to be more good than bad in order to be saved and go to heaven and do all that different stuff. Like, if you're 51% good, you stand up there on the scales of justice or whatever, and if your thing tips to good, then you're like, okay, I get in. And if not, then a little trap door opens and you fall down into hell, and that's it. And he was also under the impression that you have to get cleaned up before you go to church. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that you go to church to get cleaned up. He thinks that he's such a bad guy because he's done all these things throughout his life in order to protect certain ideals and parts of his family and stuff like that. I mean, he had it pretty rough growing up. He was on his own at like 14 years old in Denver, Colorado, working like 2 or 3 jobs at a time. Just all he knows how to do is work. So he thinks that the decisions that he's made and all that stuff throughout his life have been poor, when in reality, everything that he was doing, whether he admits it or not, is because he was doing it for somebody else. He was doing it for my mom when they met. They met when they were like 17 or 18 years old. He was like, oh yeah, I knew we were going to get married right away. So all that hard work that he put in, we were talking today, and he was like, the reason that I worked 3 different jobs when you guys were growing up is because I wanted your mom to be able to stay home and be with you guys and raise you guys. So he thinks he's all tough and all that stuff, but he's got a soft, gooey center, and he does everything out of love. And I think there's nothing for him to really get cleaned up. I mean, he drinks. Everybody down in Florida drinks. He cusses. He's got some, wild opinions about some stuff, but who cares? Everybody does. Go to church, get saved. The worst thing you can do is get saved and then just not do anything with it. You're still going to go to heaven. Are you going to have to answer for some of the stuff that could have been done? Sure. But you're still going to go to heaven at the end of the day. So I think it's a pretty sweet deal to be able to go through that. I hope that I can be fruit bearing and fertile enough spiritually so that he catches on to that. And I think my best shot is my sister, because she got saved. It's been a little while now, but that's daddy's little girl. So if she goes and talks to him about it, then it's for sure going to be a thing. So I'm waiting on her to kind of get up the gall so we can go in and get him together rather than me just doing it by myself. So I think it'll have to be an in-person thing. He doesn't like talking over the phone because he can just kind of shut down a little bit easier. But if you corner him, then he'll be helpless. So big tangent on basically saying that when you see green in the Bible, think about being fertile and fruit bearing, because that's essentially what I got out of it. A lot of the times that they're referring to it, it's all in a good context of doing the thing that God needs you to do at that certain moment, being in season. So we'll skip on down to Psalm 23, 1 through 4. This is kind of the famous psalm about green pastures. So it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." So when you're sown by the Lord, you're planted in this green pasture, and you're lying down and you're by the still waters, and you have all the nutrients, and you have, when you think about water, you're thinking about the word of God, and you're thinking about that sustenance. You're able to be fruit bearing. You're able to be restored. He says, "He restoreth my soul." I mean, you let a plant wilt for a little bit and the leaves and stuff start to fall down. And as soon as you put a little bit of water in that pot, everything opens back up. And it's super crazy. It doesn't really take a whole long time for that kind of stuff to do. The capillary action, like in the cells of the, just soaks up that water super fast. Why are you laughing at me? It's because I have to bring in the science stuff every single message. Yeah. Blame my 4 years of school doing biology. It comes out like fast facts. I can't use that degree for anything else. So this is where I get in my justification for being there, for wasting all that money going to school. It wasn't a waste. It was just a different path. That's what I have to tell myself. Just find yourself a lottery winner and get that Land Rover, Range Rover, whatever. I don't know. It seems like I was reading this article today about the relevancy of college nowadays. And it seems like it really hit a kind of an artificial peak where they're like, you have to have a 4-year degree. But now, for example, in the IT industry, you can go and get certificates from Google and have the same qualifications as people that have already paid for 4-year degrees and get these jobs in networking and IT. So that's I feel like I talk to you about college every time I see you. It's probably because my college debt weighs on me so hard that I just don't want it to weigh on other people. I want to be fruit bearing so you don't have to experience the same hardships that I have. If you could see the statements that I get each month, you would throw up. You would actually throw up. Oh, yeah. No.
I mean, I don't have it anymore.
Yeah. So that's just for you. I don't understand why they make kids. I know. I gotta keep going. I don't understand why they make 17 and 18-year-old kids pick what they want to do for the rest of your life with no guidance whatsoever. Doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. Anyways, Psalm 52. I'll get off my soapbox. Talking about referring to people or a certain man as a green olive tree. So you see people referred to as trees a couple times in the Bible. I'll read a passage about a blind man that Jesus met, and he helped him see again. And he says something pretty cool about seeing men as trees. So I'll read that here in a second after we go through Psalm 52, verses 1 through 9. It says, "Why boastest thou thyself in mischief, O mighty man? The goodness of God endureth continually. The tongue deviseth mischiefs like a sharp razor working deceitfully. Thou lovest evil more than good, and lying rather than to speak righteousness. Selah. Thou lovest all devouring words, O thou deceitful tongue. God shall likewise destroy thee forever. He shall take thee away and pluck thee out of thy dwelling place and root thee out of the land of the living. Selah. The righteous also shall see and fear and shall laugh at him. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength, but trusted in the abundance of his riches, and strengthened himself in his wickedness. But like I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever. I will praise thee forever because thou hast done it. I will wait on thy name, for it is good before thy saints. So it says all this bad stuff that people do. They're trusting in the abundance of riches, which we talked about quite a bit last Wednesday. When you put riches and you sacrifice them on behalf of the Lord, that's a good thing. We see that in the Old Testament, kind of in the beginning. And then when Aaron makes the golden calf and everything with gold kind of starts to go downhill, you start seeing people wearing it as jewelry and adorning themselves with it, and they're piling it for themselves rather than giving it back to God. And then God says, okay, enough with the gold. We're working with spiritual gold now and not gold on earth because you guys messed it up. So trusting in an abundance of riches is not a good thing. Strengthening themselves in wickedness, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you're strengthening yourself in wickedness, then you're weakening yourself in the eyes of the Lord. So it's essentially like taking a 180 away from him and being like, yeah, all this stuff over here, that's good. The riches, the earthly stuff, that's really fun. That's what I'm going to put my trust in. I'm going to put my trust in my paycheck rather than this book. And that's going to get me far. So then you see in verse 8, it says, but I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. So in complete opposite switch from everything that's going on before that. Usually when you see a but, it's a complete switch on everything that's going around before it. There's quite a few instances where they'll go through a whole big list of all these things that people are doing, and it'll say, but God, and then it'll list out what they're actually supposed to do. So in this instance, they have all this trust in wickedness and riches, and then it says, but I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever. So, if you look at the olive and the olive tree and olive branches and stuff, usually the normal connotation for it is peace. I think the first thing that Noah saw that was kind of indicative of the end of the flood was a dove holding an olive branch flying over the ship. So pretty good indication that that's the good way to look at things. So being a green olive tree, being something that's peaceful and fruitful and anything associated with the house of God and trusting in the mercy of God forever and ever, you're going down the straight and narrow at that point. You don't really have to worry about anything. Praising thee forever and ever because thou hast done it. I will wait on thy name, for it is good before thy saints. It's, textbook definition of kind of what you need to avoid and what you need to be doing in order to be fruitful for the Lord. If you're putting all your trust in the world, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. But if you're putting all your trust in God, then he'll provide you with all the things that you need. We've been looking at doing some different stuff around the house, and switching up some things that we have currently going for us. And at the end of the day, we were talking about it, and he said, we're getting by just fine right now, but if something cool happens, something cool happens. And if not, we'll still keep going. I am extremely happy with how things are the way they are now. So anything on top of this is just a bonus. So I know that the Lord's going to provide for me what he needs to provide for me. And if he doesn't give it to me, then I know that I wasn't meant to have it. It's hard for me to say that sometimes because sometimes I'll want something so badly. Joe can attest. When I get something in my head that I want to buy, I'm like looking it up every single day. And I'm like seeing if it's on sale. And I'm like, okay, well, we could just go up to Home Depot and get the locks for the house right now. She's like, we're about to eat dinner and we have to take the dogs out. I'm like, yeah, but I could go up to Home Depot right now and get that done. because it's on my mind all the time. So being able to set that aside and say, the Lord's going to provide for me. I'm going to be like a green olive tree in the house of God. I'm going to stand there, stand fast, because trees don't really go anywhere. They just stand fast and bear fruit. So being able to sit there and say, I'm ready to do whatever is willing, whatever the Lord needs me to do, and be willing to take on that and not think about, bending over the line towards the wickedness and the riches. It's I'm not perfect at it whatsoever, but I'd like to think that I'm getting better at it and praying and trusting in God that he's going to be the one that delivers me to things instead of putting it all on my shoulders that I need to do it, because his strength is 10 bajillion, quadrillion times more than mine. He's able to do literally anything at the snap of his fingers. So if he wants me to get a job or get a car or get a house or get whatever, he's going to make it happen. But if he doesn't, he's not going to worry about it because he has bigger plans down the road. So yeah, men as trees. So we'll flip over to Mark chapter 8 real quick to kind of talk about that. Something pretty interesting. I always like reading this set of verses just because I think it's kind of out there. I don't know. I don't feel like there's a lot of instances of kind of these weird visions outside of dreams in the Bible. If you read Revelations, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but this is in, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So a lot of miracles and stuff going on, but just a regular person seeing something out of the ordinary, it stuck out as interesting to me. So if we look at Mark chapter 8, verses 22 through 26, it says, "And he cometh to Bethsaida, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him." They're talking about Jesus. "And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands upon him, he asked him if he saw aught. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes and made him look up. And he was restored and saw every man clearly. And he sent him away to his house, saying, Neither go into the town nor tell it to any in the town." So I feel like Jesus maybe gave him a little bit too much miracle juice when he spit and it touched his eyes. Like he saw something beyond the plane of what humans were supposed to see, and he had to kind of like re-up on it and fix it, because the blind man sees men as trees walking, and that sounds like crazy talk to me, but there's plenty of instances throughout the Bible where people are referred to as trees, and there's also plenty of instances where Jesus is referred to as the vine, and we are all branches off of that. So I think it's not well out of the ordinary. I mean, there's a story about the donkey that could see the angel of God, and he halted because he saw him in front of him. And he was scared. He was fearful of the angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord had to kind of tap the guy and be like, "Hey, now you can see me. You can see why the donkey is shuddering," stuff like that. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Jesus to be able to go up to somebody and give them sight beyond what normal people can see, and they can see men as trees walking. And then he kind of fixes it and makes it better. He's like, whoop, whoop. All right, now you can see clearly. We're all good. 20/20 vision. Don't talk to anybody about it. But I thought it was pretty cool that there's this kind of reference that helps tie it all back together. There's all this talk about bearing fruit and being fruitful and being green, and having these opportunities to be fertile spiritually and physically around other people, and continuing your lineage and continuing your spiritual relationship with Christ. And this is a good bridge set of verses to kind of bring that all together, because it's hard to think about people at being fruitful. I'm not obviously growing apples out of my arm or anything like that. That would be very convenient. We wouldn't really have to go to the store for any kind of fruit or anything like that. But if I start sprouting apples from my arms, I'm probably going to be shipped off to some sort of government facility and experimented on for the rest of my life. But this provides kind of a good bridge because, if God can send down his son and his son can perform miracles, and he can also give other people the ability to perform miracles, and he can part the sea, and he can control the winds and literally everything on earth, I don't think it's very far out of the realm of possibilities that he can make a person see a little bit beyond what they're able to see on a regular basis. So we'll flip back kind of to the main set of points that I was going through. Song of Solomon came up with Green, which is kind of a weird book. A lot of people that I've talked to have said that it's just kind of out of place. It's, I don't know, I've read through it maybe once and I didn't really understand what was going on, and I don't think I've been back to it. But Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 16 says, "Behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant. Also our bed is green." So when we're talking about being fruitful and being fertile, I mean, saying that a bed is green, I think that's indicative of now is the time for them to grow their family. You don't, kind of the job of people in this particular time, like the guys did stuff and their entire goal as a family was to grow, and they wanted to have people to tend the fields, and they wanted to have people to tend to the animals. They needed shepherds. They needed people to be out there worrying about the crops. They needed people to tend to the house. So they weren't out hiring people or doing, I mean, in some instances where people had a little bit more money to work with, they could go out and hire other people to do work for them through, slavery or indentured servitude or whatever the case may be at the time. But the best way to do it was just to make your own slaves. So the bed being green means that, it was time to go forth and bear fruit. I mean, that's kind of one of the big purposes of the family is, you get together and you find a woman that you love and you make a family, and then you teach your kids about Christ, and then they go out and they find somebody, and it's like a multiplicative effort to kind of populate the earth with good Christian people. I think it kind of gets overwhelmed at this point. There's like, what, 8 billion people on the planet or something like that. So a drop in the bucket, but nonetheless, I mean, I'm going to do everything in my power, and I know Jill is too, to help teach Hannah the things that we've learned in the Bible. And I think that's part of being fruitful is taking care of your family first and being able to know that the seeds that you're planting close to home are going to grow and be fruitful. Because if you go out and I go to, the Dominican Republic or Haiti or whatever every weekend, and I'm worrying about the kids, out there on the streets and getting them fresh water and stuff, because that they're plagued with hurricanes and power getting knocked out all the time. You see it in the news, like every month, some island out there is just destroyed by some kind of tropical storm. Everybody can't live the way that they were living before. But if I were to go out there and try and be fruitful, then my family would deteriorate because I wouldn't be around Hannah. I wouldn't be around Jill. I wouldn't be around the people close to me. So, if the very edges of your yard are all really green and then all the rest of it in the middle is like dead and yellow, and I start off with that small section in the middle and work your way out. And you don't have to worry about everything else going on around you. Like, I know Jill's in a good spot and I know I'm in a good spot. So that checks those boxes off for me. So then I go out to my immediate relatives and her immediate relatives. And I know that her family in Arkansas is super involved in church. So it makes it easy for me to know that they're already in a good place. They squabble at each other and they have their differences, but I know that every single one of them get together on Sunday and go to church. It's just part of their routine. It's part of how they grew up. So that takes care of that side. And then I go to my parents, and that's what I'm working on right now. When I get done with them, I'll go to grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and stuff like that and work my way out. Because it's more important to start within arm's length than try and overdo your reach and lose track of where you started. because I'm sure plenty of people out there who are going and spending all their time in remote third world countries trying to talk about the Bible and all the good things that they can do for them. But, I'm sure their wives and children aren't particularly happy that they're gone all the time. There could be a lot of stuff. My dad was talking about today how he regretted working 3 jobs while we were kids because he wanted to spend more time with us. But now he sees how good that turned out, and I don't think he should regret it. I think he made the right choice. I don't want to tell him that he's right because that's not as fun. But I think he made the right choice. I think, he took care of his family first. He had to sacrifice. He had to take some time away from it. But at the end of the day, his intention was to do everything he could for us. And he wasn't going out there to work for the greater good or something like that. His entire intention was to build upon his family. So I'll try to dial back my tangents a little bit. I know I'm going crazy off this stuff, but there's plenty more. There's plenty more verses to go through and talk about people being as trees and being green. I can read through a couple of them, but I'll try to not go crazy on all of my side stories. I feel like they're partially relevant. The stuff about college, not so relevant, but the rest of it's been kind of on track. Jeremiah 11:16, the Lord called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. With the noise of a great tumult, he had kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. So, another indication of people being a green olive tree, having goodly fruit. But there's also a point where that can be taken away. If you're not doing the things that God needs you to do, there's no sense in hanging out those big, juicy apples for everybody to take a look at. They're just going to rot. So he kindles fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. So if a tree has no branches, it's not going to do much fruit bearing. And that's that. Jeremiah 17:8, for he shall be as a tree planted by the waters. So another reference to a person being a tree planted by the waters, the word of God, and that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat cometh, but her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit. So the closer you are to water, the easier it is for you to be nourished. When a drought comes, all the stuff furthest away from the water source is what dies first, and then it works its way into the riverbeds and to all that stuff. I mean, you look at any nature documentary in the African savannah, every single animal hangs out around the one tiny little puddle in the middle of this huge plain because water is the source of life. So if they didn't have that water, they would all be dying off. So they're all focusing on this one thing that's keeping them alive. And this is that source. This is that water source that helps people be green and fertile because it is the source of life. It's the source of truth for everything. Hosea 14:8, Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? I have heard him and observed him. I am like a green fir tree. From me is thy fruit found. Another reference to being like a tree and being fruitful. Repetition is the price of learning because it comes up quite a bit. So I'll go through one more thing, and this is, well, I say one more thing. I have 2 more things. The first one is Christ talking right before he was crucified in Luke, and then we'll go through Matthew chapter 13, talking about some thorns. Oh, sorry, I have one more thing. And then John chapter 15 talking about Jesus being the true vine. So I'll go through these fairly quickly just because there's some verses to read. But the main idea here is green is good. Being dried up, thorny, anything like that is bad. So Luke chapter 23, verses 26 through 32 says, "And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. And there followed him on a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bear, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And there were also two other malefactors led with him to be put to death." Sorry, I talked all day in meetings today, so it's really hard for me to talk. I'm going to steal a drink out of your water. You still have water? I'm drying up. I told her earlier I'd rather be thirsty than drink water, so shame on me. Verse 31, "For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry?" So Christ comes down to earth. He is the most fruit-bearing, spiritually fertile person possible on the entire planet. And they end up killing him and crucifying him and shunning him, stoning him, doing all these horrible things to him because they just don't believe that he is the person that he says he is. They're like, no, Christ was supposed to come as a lion and not a lamb. You know, he was supposed to be this conquering guy, and he comes in and he wants to help the sick. He wants to help the harlots. He wants to help the poor people. He wants to hang out with the people who need the help the most. And pretty much everybody who stood up here has talked about it. Doctors don't hang out with healthy people. They hang out with sick people because those are the people that need doctors. If doctors hung out with healthy people all the time, all the sick people would just perish away, and then the doctors wouldn't have a job anymore. I mean, it's the unfortunate nature of it that you're stuck around people that are in trouble. But that's what Christ came down here to do. He came to take those people out of trouble and bring them into the light because they're probably the most receptive people to it. When you're in a good spot, you know, it's harder to change your ways because you think, you know, I have this routine and I've been doing this every single day, and that's what's got me to where I am now. If I start going to church, if I start, you know, putting in this time and these other things, how is that going to affect my routine? Am I going to not have enough time to finish my work, and then I'm going to get fired and I'm not going to have a paycheck anymore and all this different stuff? But really, the people who have nothing, they have nothing to lose. So they're going in and they're saying, you know what? I'm going to give up my whole life for Christ. And those are the people that get healed. The guy that, you know, is literally a bum sitting on the street and he says, Jesus, help me out. I'm blind. And he says, okay, yeah, come over here. I'll take care of it. And then now he can see. So he's turned his entire life around. Like, that's the kind of attitude that we need to have towards it, is like, Christ needs to be the number one priority, and then everything will follow suit after that. Because if you put that at the top, then all the riches, all of the, you know, riches spiritually, whatever you need will be provided for you. So he's talking about if these people are doing this while he's around, the most spiritually fruitful person on the planet, what's going to happen when he's gone? And everything's just going to go downhill, is the point that he's making. He's talking about beginning to say to the mountains, fall on us, and the hills cover us. People purposefully making their way to be in a bad situation. So kind of his way of saying, you had your shot. You had your chance to be in the most wonderful situation possible, and you blew it. So now you get to experience what it's like when it's dry, when it's not fertile. I think I'm going to skip the thorns for the most part, just because I think you guys know that parable talking about the sower. I'll kind of paraphrase. It's in Matthew chapter 13, 3-9, if you want to read through it. Some seeds fall by the wayside. The fowls come and devour them. Some fell up stony places. So they sprung up, but they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched because they had no root. Some fell among the thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. And then the important ones are the others that fall into good ground and bring forth fruit. It says some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. So the green comes from the stuff that takes root. Everything else is going to fall on unfertile ground and be burnt up, choked out, or just not work in general. But that doesn't mean that you should try or not try to be fruitful to everything. You know, not every one of your conversations is going to lead to somebody getting saved. Not every one of your conversations is going to lead to some super miracle happening with the Bible or with Christ or anything like that. Everything is laid out to where you're planting that seed. So talking to my dad about it a little bit every single time that I talk to him, eventually he's going to be like, okay, what's the big deal? Like, I want to hear about this. So then that's when it falls on fertile ground. That's when you have to water it. That's when you have to take care of it. But, you know, they might be falling by the wayside now. They might be falling on rocky ground. They might be falling on thorny ground, you know. But that's not a reason to stop trying. You always want to be as fruitful as possible, because the more fruit that you bear that people are able to take up, the higher chance it is for it to be successful. If you only try once, you know, you've got a 1% chance. But if you try 100 times, each at that 1% chance, you know, your statistics get better. And if you try 1,000 times, if you try 10,000 times, you know, statistics of small numbers, that's how they get you at the casinos. They show you the last 10 hands to say black's really hot on roulette right now. You should bet black. But it's the same chance every single time. So you just have to increase your number of times that you're playing, and that's the only way that you can have those odds. If you play in statistics of small numbers, you're always going to lose. So make sure that you're being as fruitful as possible. Otherwise, casinos wouldn't make any money. They just have to put me there and they'll make money. I love going to the casino. It's really bad. I have a problem, but it's super fun. I got it from my mom. Thanks, Mom. Every time we come up here, we go out to Hollywood Casino because it's got really good slot machines. I'm kind of excited, to be honest. I probably shouldn't go, but I really want to. She's shaking her head. We have a baby on the way. We can't go to the casinos. Okay, last thing, and then I'll be quiet and I'll pray, and then we'll be done. So I'll just read through John chapter 15, verses 1 through 11. It says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Now ye are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you. Abide in me, and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit of itself, except it abide in the vine. Nor no more can ye, except ye abide in me. I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing. If a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch, and is withered. And men gather him, and they cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein is my Father glorified, that ye bear much fruit. So shall ye be my disciples. As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. So, the source of all the fruitfulness, the source of all the green, the source of all the fertility comes from the true vine. So it says it pretty clearly. I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. The way to spiritual fruitfulness is through Christ. So take everything back to the Bible. Make sure that this is your source of truth. This is your source of water, because if this is the water that your spiritual fertility is growing out of, and you're getting green that way, you're going to be in good shape. But if you're relying on that wickedness and riches of the world and all that stuff, you're going to be withered up and tried in fire. Says that in verse 6. So focus on Christ and you'll be in good shape. that's all I've got. I know we started about 5 minutes late, so I guess that was only about 50 minutes. Like I said, there were 44 mentions of green in the Bible, so it was a little bit more thin. Next week, Wednesday, it will be blue and purple. So I'm combining those two because they're both pretty small. I talked about purple a little bit in my very first message that I did. It kind of alludes to royalty. I'll rehash out my first part about the snails and kind of where purple and blue dyes come from. Pretty interesting stuff. Jill's shaking your head because it comes from snail butts. There's a specific species of snail. I don't think you were there, so you probably don't know this story. I'll save it for next time. Be here Wednesday, and you'll find out. And if you're not here Wednesday, then I'll be extremely disappointed in you, and I'll shun you forever. Keep that in mind. All right, I'll pray, and then we can be done. Dear Lord, thank you. Thanks for bringing everybody here tonight. Thanks for them putting up with me while I sit here and ramble. But hopefully, some of that rambling pricked their hearts so that they could get something out of your word. I know that there was a lot to work with in the Bible, even if I think that there isn't. Sometimes it's just harder for me to see. So hopefully, the verses that I provided are fruitful for everybody else here, and that I could get out of the way and not be a hindrance to that. So thank you for this church. Thank you for our church family. Thanks for bringing everybody together safely. Keep Lorinda and Sarah and DJ safe as they're down at the lake, and bring them back home safe to us. So keep us in your word. Let us not only be hearers of your word, but do as also. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Whew. My voice is a